Yo, welcome back to the Further Your Lifestyle podcast, conversations on lifestyle, passions, and hustles. My name's Chris, I am your host, and I'm super excited to be back here having the conversation with you. Episode 144 today, and we're actually wrapping up the year. This is the last episode for 2023, which just blows my mind. That we're here already, and I'll be talking a bit about, I'll take a couple of weeks off and all that jazz. I'll talk about that at the end of the episode, but today really what I wanted to focus on is basically giving yourself a set of, I guess, steps or guidelines in reflecting on the year, right? It's been a big year. Hopefully for you, it's been an amazing year. You've done everything that you've wanted to do, but there is the reality that maybe we haven't achieved everything that we wanted. And the aim of this episode is really to go through, I guess, a year in balance and basically doing a pros and cons review of your year. Now, I'm not going to be going through in detail. I'm basically just going to give you a set of instructions and take you through a guide that you can go away, whether you want to do it right now or you can go do it, listen to it a bit later, and take yourself through this pros and cons review process of the year of 2023, or maybe you're listening to this and it's another year. So that's completely up to you, but that's the purpose of this episode, and really help you look at things from a different perspective. And I know for me personally, I'm a big goal setter, and I can get quite frustrated or a little bit down when I don't see the results at the end of the year. But there's a lot of the reasons why we don't hit our goals is because either external factors or we just didn't do the work. It's that simple. And at the end of this episode, what I also want to take you through are a set of things that you can do or start thinking about now or over the next couple of weeks as you move into the new year. What can you be doing in the new year to actually make it your best year yet? So I'm going to give you a bunch of those. We're going to dive straight into this episode now. So buckle up and roll the intro. Alright, so as I said, we're going to be doing a pros and cons list. If you've never done a pros and cons list, it's quite simple, really. I mean, you're going to go through basically and list out all the pros of the year and all the cons of the year. And this will vary depending on who you are, what you've done, what you're doing, where you live, and things like that. But an example of some pros, I'm going to put this up on screen. Might be maybe you successfully learned a new language, or you build a stronger relationship with families and friends. You've achieved a professional certification. Maybe you've improved some physical health, or you've volunteered monthly at a local charity. Some of the cons, however, might be you didn't meet a goal of saving a certain amount. Maybe you've experienced a bit of stress over too much work. Maybe you had planned to read more books and you only finished a few. Things like that. And you can see a couple more there up on the screen. So look, that's as simple as they need to be. And I'm going to walk you through a bit of a process of that we can do. But the first thing we actually need to do is get ourselves in the position where we can actually start to, I guess, get our mindset right around what are the things we want to really focus on. Now, you might want to narrow down on a certain niche in a certain area of your life, but if you want to do it holistically, there's a whole bunch of things you can start to consider when it comes down to a pros and cons list. You can start to think about personal development, professional and career, your health and fitness, your relationships and social life, your financial status, your education and learning, your recreation and leisure activities, or your contribution and community. So there are probably some key areas that you can use to actually create these pros and cons lists. And one thing that you do want to do is when you go through this, and we're going to do it in a minute, is for each selected category, you're going to want to take a moment to reflect on the past year. You're going to want to, if it was personal development, think about what were the events, what were some of the changes that occurred, what were some of the milestones, what was the overall journey within this area. And where possible, I would also encourage you to try and make these points specific and measurable in the sense of like, rather than just saying I improved my work, is saying like I, increased things by 10%, or I was able to grow revenue by 10%, or I was able to run 10 more runs, or I was able to do X more of this. It just helps you then put something tangible to it or measurable to it. And you don't have to have the same amount of pros and cons. However, the balance does help make it a bit more easy to digest. But you really want to aim for a list that honestly reflects your year, your experiences, your learning, and your growth, and your areas of life. So that's why it's unique to you. So at the end of that, once you've done the pros and cons list, which we'll go through shortly, so after you've done the pros, before you move on to the cons, just take a moment, reflect on it, go do the cons, and then do that, then take a moment, step back, reflect on the cons, and then maybe look at both of them and see if there's anything else. All right, so we're going to start with pros now. If you want to do this right now, you can pause the podcast and go through it, but what you want to do is under each category, write down the positive aspects of the year. You're going to be listing achievements. You're going to be listing out progress made, enjoyable experiences, unexpected joys. And then you're also going to include small victories and simple pleasures that made a difference for your life. So you're going to do this right now. You can pause the episode. Otherwise, I'm going to jump straight into the cons as well. So go do the pros. Right, now we're going to do the cons. You've reflected on the pros. If you haven't reflected on the pros, go back and reflect on the pros. Now we're going to move on the cons. Now, under the same categories, you want to consider less favorable aspects, things that maybe didn't go as planned, maybe some disappointments, some setbacks, areas where expectations maybe weren't met. And you need to be honest about this, but don't be overly critical. Like, don't be hard on yourself. Be realistic. Be honest. And the cons are just as much as part of your growth journey as much as the pros. So it's important that you do this. So you're going to do this right now. If you need to pause it, and we'll go then into the reflecting part of this piece. All right, so hopefully you've now reflected, reviewed your pros, your cons, you've gone through it, you've got them all jotted down. Now what we want to do is actually dive into a bit of a process of reflecting on the positives, and then we'll actually be acknowledging the negatives. So reflecting on the positives is essentially acknowledging the pros. So you can look at this, and the way I would like to think about doing this is looking at it from a perspective of 4 or 5 different lenses or contexts. So the first one is major wins. Maybe have a look through and see what were some of the significant achievements and happy milestones from the year, right? What were the major wins? And have this conversation with yourself, right? And really just cherish those memories and revisit a trip down memory lane, right? What were some of the small victories? Also to consider, what were the small wins, which are often overlooked. Now, while we're doing this, if you're finding that you've missed stuff in the pros or you've missed stuff in the cons, by all means, chuck them in there. But that's the whole point of reflecting, because you're going to go through this, and now I'm challenging you even further on reflecting on these, that maybe you've actually missed something. Were there other major wins? Were there other small victories? What about surprising benefits? Were there things here which, maybe there was unexpected benefits from things that you did, and there was some positive outcomes that came through that maybe we originally thought were going to be negative experiences. So maybe you need to chuck some of those in too. The other thing to reflect on is, what about growth and learning, right? What were some of the challenges that have led to you to grow? These are all wins as well. Now, if you haven't included all these, if you haven't reflected on all these, then maybe you can add them in, because it's not about having the biggest list possible. It's about being able to acknowledge and understand that, actually, I didn't even think of that, right? Because there's a lot of things you've done this year, and I don't want you to get so stuck on, I haven't done this, or that's not good enough. But major wins, small victories, surprising benefits, and growth and learning, they're all key elements to some of the other things that we've already spoken about. Enjoyable experiences, unexpected joys, progresses made, achievements. Don't leave things on the table if you think they're relevant to adding to the pros. And that's why we reflect on it. The next part of this is actually now acknowledging the negatives. And it's going to be a similar thing. If you find, as we go through this, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. If there's a few more things that we need to add on to the cons list, then do it. Right? It's not to make a big bad list. It's really to help you say, okay, this is probably where I needed to do better. And how am I going to make this better for the next year? So the first one is obstacles and losses. Have there been difficulties and setbacks that you've experienced through the year? And you need to address them, right? Like, think about it right now. What were some of the difficulties and setbacks that you've experienced? And some of the obstacles, or maybe you've lost things, it might have been loved ones, it might have been furry friends, it might have been time, I don't know, right? But reflect on these. The other ones are missed opportunities. Consider what opportunities we've missed and why. This one can draw out a lot of regret or annoyance. Don't live with regret. Understand, okay, it was a missed opportunity. Why did you miss out on it? What were some of the things you could have done better? And how do we now make sure that if something like this happens again, that we don't make the same mistake? What about unmet goals? This one, I think you've probably already got the cons, like you've called them out, but I think you need to make sure you discuss with yourself the goals that were not achieved and explore the reasons why. Like, why weren't these goals met? And you don't have to put these in the cons, but right now, look at the goals that you didn't meet. What were the reasons why you didn't meet them? And actually think about it. Like, is it because I was just lazy? Which is probably, might be the answer, but what were some of the other reasons? What was the reason that you felt comfortable to be lazy enough to not go do the goal, right? Maybe you didn't like the goal. Maybe you weren't even interested in doing it. Maybe you were doing it for the wrong reasons. This is why it's important to reflect. What about lessons learned? Like, turn the focus on how these cons have provided valuable lessons or insights. So even though there might be a lot of cons, these are lessons learned, which can turn into positives. You don't go put these in the positive section of your pros or anything like that. They're still cons, but there's going to be some silver linings from these. So maybe this has prompted a few more things that you need to look at, but the whole purpose of this is really to help you think about it, to acknowledge them and understand, maybe it's like, even though they might be cons, they're things that are going to make you a better person. So now we can go through and actually analyze the list. And we've kind of already started doing this. And this is basically reviewing what you've seen and what you now have a better understanding of, because we've just kind of acknowledged things, we've reflected on the positives. Now we want to look at it from a perspective, right? And what I would really encourage you, if you haven't done it already, is as you look through the cons right now again, look at the silver linings. And we saw the lessons learned. We've spoken about some of the missed opportunities, some of the obstacles and losses. But in these, there's moments that can teach us new valuable insights to going forward, we don't make the same mistake. Or now you've made the mistake, but because of that small cost, now you'll never have to spend that wasted time again or that money again, and you'll avoid making that issue again or that mistake. So there's a lot of opportunity to learn from these cons. And it's on a similar perspective for the pros. How can the pros now can be enhanced? If things were working, if things went really well, how do you leverage that to elevate it? How do you leverage that to compound it? How do you leverage that to snowball it into a new year? If you enjoy doing it, how do you now take it to the next level? It's not about doubling it or things like that, but okay, I've got momentum, let's step it up a notch. So by going through this and reviewing these different elements or things that we've achieved or things that we haven't achieved, it can help us give a better perspective shift. And again, cons aren't necessarily meant to be all about, oh, you suck, or you didn't do it, or you're not good enough. No. It's just things didn't happen the way we expected. There's reasons why. We need to understand why and give yourself that balanced perspective. But also, there's silver linings in some of these. Because we didn't do that, we've done that, which led into a pro. But we didn't follow our original plan. And that's okay. You just need to understand why. If you understand why, you can then understand that, okay, this is okay. But if you understand why and you realize that's bad because you were just lazy, then you have your answer. And again, the silver lining is now, how do we fix it? As you look for all this, can you see anything that is consistently recurring? All right? Are there any patterns or anything that looks to be a theme or something where maybe in the cons, maybe you can say, I didn't do that because I just didn't enjoy it. I couldn't be bothered. If that's becoming a very common thread, maybe there's some things that need to change in your life that's going to enable you to do those things. Or maybe they're things you really don't actually want to do and you're just putting them down for the sake of putting them down, like as goals. So by going through this patterns and trends analysis, you can start to then have a better understanding of maybe you need to make some different future decisions of how you're going to tread into the new year. Which leads me to part 5, which is going through a bit of a reflection. After going through the reflection, how do we now take action? And there's 3 points here. The first one is creating balance. So you've gone through this analysis, you've got a better understanding of perspective, you've got a better understanding of patterns and trends. So how do we now create a more balanced approach into the new year, right? Now, I'm not going to answer this for you. You need to take this and think about, okay, well, what were the things that were working? You want to do more of that next year. What were the things that weren't working? Why weren't they working? What were the patterns and causing it? What was the root cause of that? So now how do I just decide, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore, right? Sometimes we see other people do things, we hear about other things, and we put things down spontaneously, like a spontaneous purchase, or, just off the cuff. And sometimes that's really bad because we buy things in the hype and then we don't end up using it. It's the same thing with goals. Like, oh, this year I want to do that. And you get excited and then you don't do it, and then you feel depressed about it because you didn't do it, when really you never really wanted to do it in the first place. If we know why we're doing things, it makes it a lot easier. So really use this to build out a balanced understanding and approach for the new year. Don't set things that you don't want to be doing. But if you find halfway through the year, maybe there are more things you want to be doing, then you can make the adjustment. The next one is make actionable goals. Translate your learnings from the pros and cons list this year into actionable goals for the new year. So does that mean, okay, I want to continue to run more, or I want to continue to grow my business, or I want to continue to reach out to friends weekly, or I want to continue to do X, Y, Z. Or maybe it means I don't want to be doing this anymore. I don't want to have to experience that feeling anymore. Or I don't want to, be as lazy as I was, based on your cons list from last year. All these different things. You can leverage that to now build something that's going to be more manageable, reasonable, sensible, actionable, and it's more of a reality, right? Realistic. And then the third point is letting go. I think I struggle with this as well. When you have a cons list, when you don't hit goals, there's a goal this year I haven't hit. I haven't hit my 2,000 kilometers of running. And I knew that was going to happen a lot earlier. Now, I could have made the decision to up my running, but I didn't want to. It didn't go to plan for the first half, and I didn't want to do double down in the second half. And I was okay with that. Like, I'm okay with that. Like, I've let go of it. Like, halfway through it, I'm like, oh, I'm not going to do it, not going to do it. And once I realized that it's like, do I really want to do all this extra work just to be able to say I've done 2,000 kilometers? No. So when you understand the drives and the reasonings behind why you have all these things, or the reason why they are on the cons list, it helps you then take the next steps in either letting go or moving them into the next year. Maybe sometimes that just wasn't your year. Maybe you said you wanted to sign a new deal with a new customer or client, but maybe that client has been away for a year and they've taken a holiday, so you haven't been able to do that. That's out of your control, right? But it doesn't mean you can't push things out. There's going to be really positive cons and there's going to be really negative cons as well. So just don't be so hard on yourself, but think about how do you move forward effectively based on now what you know, and is it time to be letting go of some things? So in summary, I think it's really important that we do take the time. Now, if you haven't done anything through this process, like as I've been speaking over this podcast for the last, 17 minutes or so, just think about it. Like, what are your pros and cons? You can do this really minimalistic. You don't have to follow it in detail. If I was to say to you, just, write down the first 10 pros and write down the first 10 cons, what are you seeing? Instantly, you're going to get a very, very quick, hard truth of the things that you liked and the things that you didn't. And maybe you can reflect on those, right? And you got to remember that both pros and cons are valuable. They're very important, and they're absolutely crucial in helping you create a balanced lifestyle and also part of the journey of what's to come. And when we look at the proportion of what 1 year really is, 1 year isn't really a big part of your life. It's like 1.25% of your life. Now, I know when we have a year and it wasn't our year, it can be quite frustrating. It's full of experiences, there's lessons, there's memories, but you got to remember that it is only 1% of your life. That can also be very daunting as well. So I hope that challenges you, because look, 1 year does not define the rest of your life. There's people that do career changes every 7 years. I started a new career after 7-8 years. That's okay. Like, it's not the end of the world. Who knows where I'll be in 7 years? The reality is when you reflect on these things, it gives you a fresh outlook, it gives you a fresh perspective, it helps you become self-aware, and it helps you understand what's working and what's not. But it also gives you the chance to step out of your current thinking and think about things a little differently. The big question, though, that I would always challenge you is like to be asking yourself, well, why didn't it work and why is it working? And it usually comes down to because if you like those things, you naturally have a tendency to do better at them. And if you don't like those things, you naturally have a tendency to push away from them. So that's how you can help then determine how do you want to make up your lifestyle. Look, the other thing you can do is, I would encourage you, maybe sit down with some friends, some family, trust ones. Hey, you can even let me know what some of your pros and cons are. But having a conversation about them could be a good thing as well. Or sharing them with other people, reflecting. I'm not saying that's what you need to do. It might just work for you. But at the end of the day, pros and cons, this is a great, small way, simple way to do a bit of a year reflection. Now, for me, this year's been a wild ride. This year, I've seen a lot of changes. And I'm not going to be talking about what I've done this year in this episode, but as we come into the new year, I will do a bit of a reflection of my own, what worked, what didn't work, and have my own self-awareness. Now, that will come in the new year of 2024. But my encouragement to you before we wrap up is, one, I want you to enjoy the holiday season. I will be taking a couple of weeks off. We'll be back sometime early January. And my encouragement to you is in this down period is take some time to prep for the new year, right? Think about what you want to be doing. Think about what we've just gone through today. Think about where you want to be in the next year. And I've got a few high-level points here that I want to share with you before we finish that you can use and take away and leverage and think about to hopefully help next year be your best year yet. And the first one is set clear and achievable goals. Now, I've spoken about this so many times, all right? I'm not going to go into the details, but I'll keep it high level. Be specific, write them down, and review regularly. And when I say be specific, it's like, don't say, I want to lose weight. Say, I want to exercise 30 minutes 3 times a week. That's the way to do it. Write them down and then review them on a regular basis. The next one is embrace time management techniques. A lot of the time, the reason why we don't get things done is because we don't prioritize our time. We don't give ourselves the time or the permission to use that time. So you need to prioritize your tasks, work out what is going to be high priority and low priority. Also think about maybe you can leverage some time blocking, setting up some calendars, setting up some routines. But the key one is limiting multitasking. How can you stay focused? How can you put things in place to ensure that when you are doing this, you're focused 100% on this and remove your distractions? The next one is develop healthy habits. And of course, it's easy to say develop healthy habits, but the reality is consistency is always going to come out better than over intensity. And it's not about saying, okay, I'm going to do this 100 times today. No, if you can just do something one time every day for 365 days, that's 365 times. And if you've never done it before, you're now 365% better, right? You're 365 ahead, right? So start with smaller, consistent wins, right? Things that you can do daily, that you tick them off. And as you build that momentum and that confidence, you'll be able to do more and more and more. Also think about a holistic approach to building your healthy habits. Think about how do you incorporate habits that support physical, mental, emotional health, like things such as regular exercise or meditation or socializing. And then the other one is routine building. I like to have routines because it gives me something to fall back on. It gives me something to keep my life in flow. And when you incorporate the daily habits, these healthy habits, and you have a routine, things just start to roll. It makes it a bit easier to do. The next one is reflect and adjust regularly. I would always recommend do a monthly check-in. I always do that for my business, but it's always good to reflect back of what have I achieved this month. Be flexible with yourself. You know, you might have to pivot. You might have to adjust as things don't go to plan as you progress into the year. So pivot your strategies, pivot your goals. That's okay. And the other one is celebrate your wins or your progress. Super key. Now, the last point is learn to say no. If you want to make better progress this year, in the coming year, set boundaries. Have boundaries. Know your limits. Be willing to decline things. Set expectations around this. Do not get yourself burnt out. Set the boundaries, right? And we said it before. It's quality over quantity. You want to be focused on committing to fewer things that you can do really, really well so you're not getting stretched thin. And then the final part is self-care must be a priority. How can you love someone else if you can't love yourself first? So schedule time in for you to do things that you want to do. Give yourself that break. I'm talking to myself here too. It's very, very important. All right, well, that is the wrap up for 2023. And it's not, it's not about my year, your year, but it's an exercise that we can take. And you can use this on a monthly basis. You can use this on a yearly basis to really go through and understand what are the pros, what are the cons, what's working, what's not, and to see if you can leverage that, reflect on that, and then now make next year your best year yet. As I said, I will be taking a couple of weeks off. I'm currently in the Philippines at the moment. I filmed this before going away, and I'll be back early January, so there might be an episode hopefully by mid-month. I haven't got the date for it yet, just, figuring all that out, but we'll be back into the new year, ready to rumble, do it all again. I'm excited for the new year. I'm going to be spending a lot of time over this break, and when I say over this break, I'm talking about right now while I'm filming. Over the next 6 weeks as we wrap up the year, I'm going to be spending a lot of time doing a lot of planning. But for you, over the next couple of weeks, as I take a break from this podcast, enjoy your time off, enjoy your Christmas, enjoy your New Year's, have a happy new year, take it easy, look after yourselves, spend it with your loved ones, and, really reflect on what you want next year. Hey, you can let me know in the comments what you're working on achieving for next year if you would like. If you enjoyed this episode and you want to share it with someone that you think they should go do a pros and cons list, send them the link to this episode and say, hey, go do this pros and cons list, right? Challenge them, get them excited for what they can achieve for the new year. Hey, because sometimes we don't know what people need. Sometimes people just need things from a different perspective to enable them to go to their next level, right? And I want to help people further their lifestyle, right? And I want you to further yours. So I appreciate you being here. Any questions, comments, chuck them down below. You can reach out to me on the socials. Appreciate you being here. And you have a wonderful day. Cheers.